Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight's video is dark indeed, and touches on aspects of paranormal sexual abuse. So, if that isn't your thing, feel free to click away now. I also have a very big announcement to make. A very good friend of mine has started a channel of his very own, dedicated to crime. And it would mean a lot to me if you could go over and check the video out when you're done here. We have spent most of the day and part of yesterday working on creating the channel and the video that just launched a few hours ago. So please go and pop over there when you're done and let him know what you think of the work. It would mean an awful lot to me. Thanks guys. Before the video begins though, you need to know that this month I am hosting a mega giveaway. There are only 3 surprise mystery boxes left up for grabs, and a new box will become available every 3 days. To enter, all you need to do is to leave a comment, press the little bell icon, drop a like and be subscribed to Mortis Media. However, there is a catch. You have to have left a like on a comment on each video that came out in those 3 days in order for your entries to count. Today is the first day for your chance to win the 8th surprise mystery box, so be sure to tune in tomorrow and the next day to get your entries in. There's also going to be a handful of consolation prizes for those of you who didn't win the box, and will only be eligible for those of you who commented and liked every video in May. Now, I'm very pleased to say the winner of the 7th box has been selected, so be sure to listen up at the end for the reveal. Is it you? Best of luck everyone, but for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I was visited almost every night by what I thought at the time was my deceased sister, from the ages of 11 to 16. I don't believe in the supernatural, and I never have, but things happen to me that I honestly cannot explain, neither at the time nor now. It wasn't my sister. I don't know what it was, but to this day, I seriously doubt that my sister would be sexually and physically assaulting me. I saw it one time, when I was 16. I was laying in my bed, not asleep, just staring out of my bedroom window, because I couldn't bring myself to feel tired at all. I remember it was about 1:30 in the morning, and I had gotten into a fight with my mother. Coincidentally, about staying up all night when I had school the next day. So when I heard my door open, I immediately lied down and acted as if I were asleep. So I hear the familiar creaking and cracking of her toes as she walks towards my bed. Her toes pop whenever she walks, and I can hear her coming from across the house. And I'm just laying there, pretending like I'm not awake. I hear her voice, and it was a rushed, low whisper. And it wasn't until she was standing almost directly over me that I could hear that she was frantically whispering my name over and over, and over and over and over again. I remember my heart was pounding in my chest, because she's close enough to me that I can smell her, and she doesn't smell like anything I've encountered before. It was a mixture of rotten ground after a rainstorm and dead fish left in the sun for a week. I opened my eyes, and I could see her illuminated in the moonlight from my window. It wasn't my mother. What was lording over me was a woman that stood a little less than 6 feet tall, with stringy and disgusting black hair that fell a little bit past her shoulders. I remember that the most horrifying things about her were that, aside from a disgusting grime that covered the sheer white dress, she was completely naked. I could see the dark points of her nipples through the material, and I'm assuming that she wasn't wearing any underwear. Her exposed skin was diseased looking, extremely frail and thin, but it looked tight, and a network of black veins stretched against it from underneath. She was white, but honestly she was more of an off-green, like an egg that had gone bad. And God, her eyes were just the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. To this day, a perfectly smooth face, no nose, no lips, no ears, just eyes. Eyes that were 4 sizes too large and perfectly round. Eyes that had no white, had no colour, and that were just a solid jet black. The skin around these spherical nightmare windows was crinkled and crusted with flecks of something that looked black, but could have easily been a dark red or brown, as in moonlight it's not easy to distinguish colour. She had bug eyes, and they were hovering a half-foot away from my face. I couldn't move. My body was stuck in "oh my Jesus Christ" mode, and I couldn't even breathe through the terror. She bent over me and knelt onto my bed, and I felt the pressure. I felt the bed move as she rested her knees on either side of my waist, because of course she would be straddling me. Why wouldn't this nightmare be straddling me? It lowered its face down to mine and touched her forehead to my own. And where the contact happened, I felt my skin burn, almost as if I were getting a lie kiss from Tyler Durden. I still couldn't move, and I still couldn't breathe. I knew that if I opened my mouth, this, whatever it was going to tear out my soul, and I knew I was screwed. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that the entire time this thing was grinding on my lap. The only sound in the room was the sound of my brain shrieking, and the subtle shuffle of this thing frantically rubbing its crotch against my own. All I could see was its eyes filling up my entire vision. All I could smell was its filthy hair as it brushed against the side of my face, and a more subtle, more terrifying smell of arousal as it enjoyed what it was doing to me. I got the surge of strength back in me, and I rolled to the side, trying to knock this thing off, because I thought that maybe I could get it off, and then I would run. My bedroom had a door that led to the backyard, and maybe I could just get out there and run and never look back. But no, this thing clings to me, and now I've got this writhing she-beast dragging its dirty fingernails in my back, and they felt like knives. The paralysis sets back in, and as I'm thinking, I realized that as long as this thing was making eye contact with me, I couldn't move. I tried to close my eyes, but it wouldn't work. I tried to shift my vision away, but her forehead was touching mine. And that was all I could literally see. It was those black pools of her own demonic eyes. And I pissed myself in fear. I feel her hand reaching across from my back to my chest and up my throat, where it grips me tightly behind the neck and holds me with more force than anything has ever held me before. It removes its face from directly in front of mine as it's dragging its fetid hair in my face, and I feel it press its smooth, tight skin of its own featureless neck against my own. I feel something shift against my neck, like a swarm of flies pressing against my skin. Something wet and very cold touches me, and then I realize that this thing has formed a mouth, and it has started to lick me. Where it touches burns like the devil, and now I'm not moving because I'm terrified that if I do, it will use its newfound mouth to tear my throat out. Something sharp then grazes my neck. I try not to think about razor blades. This spurs on whatever this thing is, and it resumes grinding. I feel its other hand tear a furrow from my back down to the waist of my pajama bottoms, where it slips under and starts to shift from my back to my waist to the front. I realize this thing is reaching for my genitals, and I summon whatever surge of adrenaline I had left in me to bring my knee up between our bodies, and I kick it as hard as I can. Something sharp tears into my neck, but it's too late, and despite its scrambling hands and tearing nails, I boot this thing off me and hear an audible thud on the other side of the room. I immediately haul ass to my closet, where I keep my machete that I used to clear brush as I had an overgrown backyard. It was clumsy, but really all I did was throw myself in with as much force as I could, off at the end of the bed, because that is where the closet was. I turn around with my machete in hand, knowing that I'm about to destroy this thing, and it's gone. There's nothing there. I turn the light on after a serious internal pep talk, and I grab the mattress futon and tear off the lattice metal frame, machete poised to strike at the thing that must have scuttled underneath it. But there's nothing. At this point I'm telling myself that I just had the worst nightmare in the world, and that I have pissed myself, and that I should probably shower. I grab another set of PJs and stagger into the bathroom, leaving the machete in the room, although with great reluctance. I check my neck, and I am bleeding a lot. I have a gash that is about 3 inches long, right where the shoulder and neck meet, curving around to my back. My forehead has a red splotch on it, and the skin is peeling back, like a very bad sunburn. I turn around and survey the horror scene that is my back. Trenches have been carved, and there is a whole lot of blood everywhere. My back, my sides and my hips. Thank God I kicked off that creature before she got me in the dick, and the crotch of my pajama pants were covered in this awful stain that smelt like a mixture of blood, sweat, and death. I shower with the curtain open. I turn on the kitchen light, turn on the library light, the living room light, and when I get to my bedroom, I open the door and immediately turn on the light. It's still empty, although now that I know what to look for, I see splatters of red blood on my own quilt, and the room smells like a grave. I did not sleep that night, or the night after, or the one after that. I told a few select people, but nobody believed me. Why would they? Even when I showed them how this thing turned my back and neck into a connect the dots made out of nails. Everyone said I must have just done it to myself in my sleep, but some of those marks were in spots that I couldn't myself reach. I still feel like something sits down next to me from time to time when I'm laying in bed, and I'll open my eyes and nothing will be there. I don't sleep more than 4 hours a night, and that's usually broken up into segments. I sleep better in other people's homes than I do my own. It's been a few years since I've encountered it, and I only ever saw it that one time. But considering that it started when I was 11, I don't think it really was a factor for whatever this thing is, and I'm convinced that one day it will be back, and the last thing I will ever see will be those eyes, filling up my vision as it presses its forehead against my own. I wish I could say that this was some horror story that I fabricated or made up. I really do. I don't believe in the supernatural, but that doesn't mean that this didn't happen, or that whatever that thing was isn't real. A dorm at a local university had a student die of alcohol poisoning on his 21st birthday, and there have been lots of reports of creepy things happening in the dorm room that he died in. Students reported tapping from the inside of the windows, shoes being rearranged while they were out, and a loud scraping noise that came from upstairs. You must understand that people upstairs thought it was coming from downstairs. Anyway, there is a youth sport camp that uses this dorm for a summer residence, and I was a counselor, so I stayed in the dorm with the kids. I was assigned to stay in the room that the aforementioned student perished in. I grew up in the same town as the college, so I knew about the ghost, and I didn't think anything of it. There's no such thing as ghosts, right? I moved in, and the only thing that looked different about the room, compared to other rooms in the dorm anyway, was that in this one, there was a crucifix. During my week, shit got weird. Several times I heard loud tapping from the inside of my window. One night, I poked my head outside of my door late and yelled, "Lights out," to some kids running down the hall. My lights promptly turned on by themselves inside my room. Finally, during a break at the end of the week, I went back to my room for a nap. I found my TV was on, and the volume was extremely loud. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the kids had been playing PS2 in my room and had forgotten to turn it off. I grabbed the remote, lay on the bed, and hit the power button, but the TV stayed on. I took the batteries out and tried again. To no avail. I picked up my lazy ass, walked to the TV and pressed the power button. Nothing. I turned down the volume. Nothing. I finally unplugged the TV. Nothing. I am totally freaking out. I unplugged the cable from the TV, thinking that without the power, it would have to come out. Nope. I sat there holding the TV power cord, the cord cable, and the remote, and was watching the TV continue to play. I ran from the room, got another counselor and showed him. He promptly freaked out, and we left the building to get the camp director. And when he got to my room, the TV was off. I guess the guy just really wanted to watch Jeremy Springer. When I was born, my family lived in an older house. I'm British, so when I say old, I mean very old. When I was a kid, a young girl used to look after me in my bed. She would always come and look down at me and smile. One night, I was trying to sleep, but she just kept poking and pushing me. I was very young, so it made me cry. My parents were pissed off because they came into my room and had to wake up. They took me downstairs and put me down there, hoping I would give up crying and go to sleep. When my dad left the room, she came back and kept on prodding me again and again until I started crying. After a little while, my dad came down, and just before he came into the room, she smiled and left. When my father came into the room, he said there was smoke coming from the floor, and he ran everyone out of the house. Turns out, there was an electrical fault under the floor, and the house almost caught fire. A little later on, my father was up a ladder, fixing something on the side of the house. The ladder fell over, and he broke his leg. To this day, he claims that something had hit the ladder. Whenever anyone went to the loft or the attic, it felt cold, and you felt like someone was watching you. The final straw was when my mother woke up in the middle of the night and sat up to see a young girl looking at her. I think it was the same girl who used to look down at me. My mother felt that this was a warning sign from her and that we had to leave. We did that next morning, and the day after that, the top floor collapsed into the lower floor, almost destroying the house in its entirety. I've never been sure if that girl was looking out for me or attacking me, but bad things only ever happened to me, my brother, or my dad, never my mother. After we left, the house had to be repaired, and when it came for a new family to move in, they had a son who was quite sadly born with brain damage. Take from that what you will. About 10 years later, my father got a blood clot and was pronounced medically dead for 10 minutes before he managed to come back. I asked him about it afterwards, and he felt like he was lying on the ceiling looking down at himself. He decided it was not the right time to die, and decided to live. For a couple of years after, strange things happened to him. Sometime later, we were driving down an A road. For those of you who have never been to England, these are fast roads with a speed limit of 60 miles per hour, but are different to the motorway or highway, and tend to meander and have roads joining them in odd places. As we were driving down the road, my father looked up at a car coming on the road on the right and said, "I need to stop." He pulled to a stop, but the other car didn't. It carried on straight across the road onto the small embankment on the other side. If my father had never stopped, well, we would have been ploughed into. The car would have no doubt been hit on the side, killing me and him for sure. Afterwards, he just said that he heard someone saying that he needed to stop. Let's go on a few years, skipping some minor events and going on to the next big one. I went to a grammar school in a crazy area. The school was actually converted from an old hospital, and the library was the old chapel. The art room was an old wardroom, and the classrooms were converted from offices and old labs. It was a very crazy place. I was playing rugby after school and had a minor injury when another player accidentally stamped on my head. I know, accidentally. School had already left after the nurse said I was okay to go, so I called my father to come and collect me. I went out to wait for him at the main gates, and as I waited, a taxi pulled up, and the driver yelled, "Taxi for Jerry?" I thought the lazy guy had sent a cab instead of coming himself, so I jumped in, went home. I got there and no one was home, and I was a little confused, but sat down to wait for my parents to arrive. About 30 minutes later, the phone rang and it was my school, and everyone, including my father, was searching the grounds for me. There were no other Jerrys in my school, surprisingly, and my father didn't call a cab. It was quite a strange coincidence, and on the way back home, my father was delayed in traffic, where 2 cars had crashed 20 minutes earlier, just the time when we would have been driving home. And you know what the best part was? I didn't even have to pay for the cab. There are 2 incidences in my life that I still cannot rationally explain. The first happened when I was 14, the first week after my family moved into a new house. We liked the house. It was comfortable. But one night, I woke up in the middle of the night to find a man staring down at me in bed. He was short, somewhat portly, perhaps Italian, and was older and balding. He wore a plaid shirt with yellow in it and blue jeans. I freaked the hell out and hid under the covers and said some prayers. And when I peeked out some seconds later, he, of course, was gone. About 10 years later, my family and I were at the dinner table, and the topic of the paranormal came up, which gave me enough courage to share my story to my family, in the hopes that I wouldn't be ridiculed. Bear in mind, I had never told anyone this story, not my family, not my friends, not a soul. So I told them that I'd seen a man. That's it, that I'd seen a man. And then my dad turned white and asked me more questions about the man. He then asked if the man was wearing a yellow plaid shirt and blue jeans. At that moment, we stared each other in the eyes, and my blood ran cold. Yes, he was, I confirmed. My dad then said he had seen the same man twice. Once in his master bedroom. He was looking up in the mirror, and he saw the man facing back at him. And when he turned, he was gone. In another occasion, he was in his master closet, picking out a nice shirt. He turned and saw the man just standing there facing the clothing rack. Also, regarding that closet, I had a weird experience when I was about 18. I was in the master bedroom watching TV because someone was using the one downstairs, and I didn't like staring into the dark closet because I am afraid of them. So I get up to close it. I push the door closed, but then the door was yanked out of my hand, and a male gruff voice demanded, "What?" It wasn't the TV. I was watching the Weather Channel, and it had music playing whilst the forecast was being said. I ran downstairs and recounted what happened to my mother, and I refused to go back into that closet again. The final one. The second house I lived in was a new subdivision. The town was on the shores of Lake Ontario, on land previously inhabited by the Iroquois native people. New subdivisions always have to be investigated by archaeologists, in case a significant site was discovered, or the construction constantly unearthed pottery, arrowheads and more. So I was 3 when we moved into the house, and this experience is my father's. He was setting up his weightlifting equipment in the back of the unfinished basement, and one day, while he was bench pressing, he opened his eyes to find a native Canadian man staring grimly down at him, wearing animal skins and bird feathers. Dad freaked out, sat up, and tried to say something. But the man, of course, was gone. When I was about 8, I was going to bed in my room when a grey thing, about the size of a football, slowly moved across the foot of my bed, slightly pulling the blankets as it went. When it got to the end, and I couldn't find a trace of it. We had cats, but my door was closed, and none were in my room at the time. My parents didn't believe me, and I can't say I would have if I were one of my kids, and I was terrified for ages. In the same room as the previous event, I had a door which opened to a screened porch type thing. There was no other way to get into it, as it was locked many times from the inside, at the other exit. Every so often, the door would make a sound which was like someone throwing their whole body against it. A very loud thump, with various elements, as if different limbs were striking it. So it was definitely odd. It sounded like someone was on the other side, and was pretty well defined as noises come. This happened during any time of the day. It didn't matter. One evening, it just kept happening over and over, like someone was trying to break their way into my room. I made my dad check it out, while I stood behind to see, and there was nothing. He closed it up, locked the door, and went about his business. Then it started again, quietly at first, then building up into loud crashes. I had Dad check again. There was nothing there. I have no idea what it was, but it was freaky as hell. In the same house, there were lots of little things which I'm sure had more to do with being freaked out than a kid than anything else, but I could be wrong. I had many instances of terrible sleep paralysis, where I could feel something grabbing lightly at the foot of me, or pushing in my belly and chest. I would often see cats skirt about my feet, or around doorways when there was no cat there. I would hear angry, indecipherable whispers when sleeping in the living room of the creepy, old house. During the same time period, but this was in my friend's house, the following event occurred. She lived in a 2-family home on the top floor. They had a shared attic with a stairway up to it, which was next to her room. Her downstairs neighbor was an elderly woman, and she lived there for many years. After she died, we would often hear very human-sounding footsteps in the attic, but not going up the stairs behind her room to the attic, which were normally very audible. When I was pregnant with my first child, we lived in a small house in New Mexico. One day I'm sitting at my computer and a dog starts barking in our yard. So I turn around and look out the window. As I do this, I see what I think is our dog walking from the front door past the couch into the bedroom. Only then I realize that our bedroom door is closed and our dog is outside. This one freaked me out quite a bit because it happened when I was an adult and is very difficult to explain away. A few years ago, we were living in our new home in Texas. I'm home alone with the kids and my husband is out of town for work. It's the middle of the day, so I wasn't exactly freaked out, when all of a sudden, something bangs on the house from the outside. It's not unusual, it could be anything. Then it happens again on the other side, then the back door, and it keeps going around the house in circles and getting faster. It was way too quick for it to have been something running circles around the house. When I finally get the nerve to open the back door and look, there's nothing there. It stopped after I looked and gave me a big pit in my stomach. When I was growing up, my parents moved into a newly remodeled home. Apparently, it used to be a furniture parlor, and because of its location, which is not too terribly close to anything, it was a pretty great price. Now, the first thing you have to know about my parents is that they've never been known to lie to my brother and I. Even though I was young, I remember that house vividly. It was small, and all the rooms were minuscule, though there were a lot of them. Even the stairs were kind of funny. Tiny steps that snaked around the far wall of the home and made loud sounds when stepped on. During the day, the house was tame, albeit old. However, at night, when my parents would put my brother and I to sleep, shit got real. The pans downstairs would clank together, and then loud booming as someone stomped up the stairs. The next thing I can remember is the bed shaking left and right. Oftentimes, our Ernie and Bert piggy banks would start to shake, and they'd turn around. Being young, we didn't like them looking at us at night, so we would face them towards the wall, and they'd always be turned around again. Even our parents both remember how they could hear the change jingling around as the banks moved. By morning, it would all be back to normal, and the cycle would repeat. I moved into a new house in March 2011. The house was built in 1920. My dog came with me when we got the house inspected, and she was running up and down the stairs and seemed happy and healthy. I was working in the house prior to moving in one day, and found myself in the basement. Around 5 p.m, I heard a door close at the top of the stairs. I then heard footsteps on the floor above. I then mistakenly start talking to whatever was down there. I said they could stay in the house if they didn't scare my wife or my pets. I went upstairs and found the front and back doors locked. I was inside the house, alone, and then I got really intense feelings all over my body that felt like pins and needles to the 10th power. The next day, I was once again in the basement. I was rooting around in a toolbox when I saw a roll of sandpaper unraveling by itself. I was gone at this time too. A short while later, I was looking for another toolbox and a case that was 4 feet away and slammed violently on the ground. I then mistakenly spoke to the spirit again and told them to get out. I then heard a loud thud at the top of the stairs. Shortly after, we moved into the basement and started to renovate the 2 top floors. I've never had any kind of problems with the renovation into the basement, and I had never seen the kind of problems with the renovation that this house presented. My daughter visited the house and said the master bedroom was haunted. She said the spirit comes and goes but shouldn't be a problem, and the problem continued. My dog also started to decline physically. When we cleaned out the attic, we found a voodoo love potion and spellbooks and a VD handbook together in a box. Unbeknownst to me, my wife dug up a wheelbarrow full of trolls and other dolls in our backyard. We took the dogs to the vet the next few times, and they could not find anything wrong with her. She would just lie under our bed all day and all night. Finally, we took her to another vet in August. The vet told me she had full cancer, and we put her down the next day. We were devastated. I thought that whatever was in our house had harmed the dog. My wife and daughter disagreed, and I was having nightmares regularly. They found almost always to be some type of force that would hold me down. And I would awaken terror after being unable to get the force away from me. We finally called a guy who dealt with our type of problem. He said his cell phone just went blank as he walked into our house. He said he could feel the energy coming from the house, standing on the sidewalk in front. He came inside the house and immediately went to the areas where I heard the noises and saw the sandpaper unravel. He said that someone had been practicing voodoo in the house, and that at the core of the house was affected. He did a few things and drew a few symbols, and you could feel an immediate difference in the house. He explained the spirits were trying to attack me, and when I didn't back down or show fear, they went after the dog. He said that explains the dog sensing this, and they were trying to attack me. But when I didn't back down or show fear, they just went for her. He said the dog sensed this and put herself in harm's way in order to protect me. He said the dog and I shared the pure. He said the dog sensed this and put herself in harm's way in order to protect me. He said the dog and I shared the purest form of love between us. This is making me cry as I write this. And there were times when no bad feelings associated with the sensation happened. I called the guy who cleared the house and told him to come back after 5 days. When I called back, he told me that the dog was returning to the house to check up on us. I had a few more feelings like this after that, and I also heard a knock on our basement door after I stepped inside the door. When I opened the door, no one was there. I like to think it was my dog again. We finished our reno and moved upstairs, and there have been no incidences since. When my parents got divorced, my mother moved to a nice lake house. She bought it from a widow whose husband had died of lung cancer. I'm not sure if he passed away in the house, but we do know that during his last years, he would only stay in the house when he wasn't at the hospital, as they had no children. My sister and I assumed He passed away or spent most of his time on the second floor, where our two bedrooms and bathrooms were. Someone was leaning on it. My sister felt the same way. But when you're going to your room at night, you can be misled. We would also hear creaks in my dresser, like someone was leaning on it, and my sister would feel the same. My sister felt the same way, but about someone sitting in her chair in her room and creaking it. We would both wake up in the middle of the night, and just an eerie feeling that we were being watched would prevail over us. Some doors that seemed to close when you did not recall opening them would be open or closed. My bedroom entrance had two double doors that opened inwards to the room. A walk-in closet door that opened inwards towards the closet, and a door to the bathroom that opened outwards towards the room with a double sink for my sister and me, and a door to a room with a shower and a toilet that happened towards it. There were also a couple of doors from my sister's room to where the sinks were, and a door in her bedroom. The important thing is to recognize that the doors don't open by themselves in that many different directions. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I thought I heard someone move, and I quickly turned across and looked in the mirror, and there it was behind me. Immediately upon making eye contact with my reflection, all the second floor doors opened, and at the same time, 6 left slammed echoes across the house. There were no windows, no air, and no reason for them to be open, as this is Minnesota in the winter, and the double doors that had been open slammed together. I felt trapped and ran to jiggle the bedroom door in order to try and flee, running down the stairs. A few months later, I was heading up the stairs to go to the bathroom and bedroom after dinner. My sister had only been on the computer in my room immediately before dinner when we were at my computer. A few months later, I was heading upstairs towards my bedroom after dinner. My sister had been on the computer in the room before dinner, when it was light out. But as it got darker while we ate, the only thing in my bedroom was my radiating Julie from the old iMac in my room. As I got to my room, I thought I saw something move. But again, the only light was from my dull Mac blue computer screen. I turned to hit the light switch button, but before I thought I saw something move, so I stopped with my hand on the watch. Within the light cast by the computer, there was a shadow that was so unsimilar, and it began to move. It was 2 shadows really, and they looked like legs. Slowly the 2 legs moved again, like legs, but they were slowly walking towards me, like they were almost transparent, like light shining through wax paper. As they approached me, I screamed and threw the light switch, and I never slept on the second floor again. I was house sitting and taking care of the dogs for my aunt. It was an old farmhouse, old as in the kitchen and the bathroom were added onto the house when working plumbing became a thing. I played some video games, watched a little TV, and was just winding down to go to sleep. I was just laying there in the dark trying to doze off, when I hear something coming from upstairs. The upstairs was an attic turned into bedrooms for my cousins. The way I could best describe it was like a pipe or a bottle. The sound of some kind of hollow object rolling back and forth across the floor in the room directly above me. I just sat there wide-eyed and scared shitless. Finally, I worked up the courage to try and get up and turn the light back on, and the rolling sound continued. I told myself that it was just something in the walls trying to come up with any rational explanation. I got up and turned back to the TV, and was just kind of drowning out the sound with the lights on. Finally, I worked up the courage to get up and turn the lights back on. The rolling sound continued, and I told myself it was just something in the walls trying to come up with any rational explanation. I go up to turn the TV back on, and just kind of drag out the sound. With the lights on, I noticed the dogs. 2 big Rottweilers were sitting silently in the kitchen, hair bristling and staring at me. I backed away, honestly afraid they were going to attack me, but I realized they weren't staring at me. They were looking past the doors that go upstairs. Well, shit. They didn't even need to settle my nerves. But there was no way in hell I was going to get up to investigate. I clanked up the TV and eventually coached the dog into the living room. And when I was there, I tried again. I left on the TV, just turned it down, laid back down on the couch and got some rest. I didn't know for how long I was asleep, just that when I woke up it was still pitch black outside. What woke me up were the doors. My feet were hanging over the arm of the couch, and I was sleeping on the door that led upstairs. What woke me up was the door. My feet were hanging over the arm of the couch, and I was sleeping on the door that led upstairs. It had come open and hit me with my feet. If you've ever lived in an old house, you know that it's not too difficult to do. It's old after all. The house that had been warped far too many times by different writers rubs on the frame when you shut it. The kind you would have to put your shoulder into to close it all the way, as you'd really have to pull hard again to open it. Yet there it was, wide open in a pitch black staircase. The hinges creaked as it bumped against my dangling feet. I was up and out in seconds, the dogs right behind me. I put my shoes on the car, put the dogs in their kennels, and I was off to sweet civilization. I didn't care about using all the gas to drive out and feed my dogs every day. I wasn't spending another night in that house. I was maybe 11 when this happened. My dad was at a conference in Vancouver for the weekend, and so it was just my mum and me at home. I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and all the lights in the house are off. I turn on the bathroom light and close the door, mostly. I do my business and go to wash my hands, and I look in the mirror and see what looks like toothpaste speckles in the reflection of the crack of the door. I'm still washing my hands as I realize, no, I definitely washed the mirrors today. So curiosity gets the better of me. I turn 180 and look in the crack of the door, and boom, someone is looking back at me, eye to eye. And she didn't look happy to see me either. It's a girl, maybe early teens. Her hair was really lank and thin, almost greasy looking, and she probably looked a little overweight, or had a really flat round face. She was wearing to what my brain looked like a purple dress, except that she was all in grayscale. But you know, all night colours are different, so maybe that's why that didn't tip me off immediately. She had glasses on with thin wire frames, and I remember them distinctly because my mum wears glasses just like that. And the first thing I thought of was, what's my mum doing up? Maybe she has to go to the bathroom. Wait, why is my mum wearing her glasses in the middle of the night? And then it hits me. Oh shit. I can see the TV through my mum. Instantly, I freeze in terror. So I stand in the bathroom for what feels like half an hour, but was probably more like a minute, trying to figure out what to do and to give the mental fortitude to do so. So eventually, I figure I just better deal with this right now. So I rip open the door, and everything I've got, I can only describe as a whispering. Like how when you blow out a candle and the smoke dissipates into the air? She did that. So I stand in the open bathroom doorway for what probably was another minute, but feels like years, before I get up the courage to go down the hall into the bedroom and turn all the lights on and read until sunrise. There have been other less descriptive and intense experiences in my house as well, but that one was more intense than I thought it would be. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Okay, so I'm sorry for not posting 2 nights ago. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but in the last 3 weeks, views have been dropping significantly, which is weird, as it kind of did the opposite of what I thought, given the giveaway. Anyway, I'm quite confident this has a lot to do with that issue where YouTube is no longer displaying the video in chronological order, as well as showing it to less subscribers and putting it in a lower place in the feed where most people don't tend to scroll to, which is very frustrating and a little bit upsetting, to be honest. I spent pretty much all of Friday trying to find solutions in vain, trying to get in contact with people, and obviously it led to nothing. And it didn't help that I was feeling pretty ill before that anyway. I just hope the YouTube fixes this, because I think most, if not all, the community-driven creators are suffering big time. But on the bright side though, I do have the pleasure of announcing tonight's winner of the 7th mystery box, and the winner is Paisley Rhino. Congratulations! Be sure to send me an email to claim your prize. Make sure that you don't forget to drop that like and leave a comment to get your entry in today, and to hit the subscribe and bell icon to be up to date with everything I post. Today was day 1 for the 8th box, so make sure you've entered for your chance for victory. And as I said at the start of the video, please head on over now to my friend's channel called Briefcase. It's a play on words, which takes an in-depth look at some very serious crimes. We worked pretty much all day today and yesterday setting everything up, so I would absolutely love to hear your feedback on it. The link is actually available right now. You should be able to see it. So give it a click. It's not long, and please let me know what you think. It would mean the world to me. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.